All right. Hey there. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the UNSECURITY podcast. This is episode 119. The date is February 17th, 2021. And I'm your host, Evan Francine. Joining me is my good friend, as pretty much always. I think we've been together for the last, God knows how many podcasts. But here's Brad and I. Hey, Brad.
Good morning, Evan.
How's it going today?
Good. Busy.
Cool. Yeah, right. Yeah, I was up till I don't know what time last night, and whatever. I'm not going to complain. We're security people, and we often work long hours.
Yeah, it does. It does eventually, kind of catch up to you, and you got to reset. But
right. Yeah. I was going to have to say some jokes, but they're inappropriate, and I'm not sure if we're in cancel culture or not, so I'm not going to say stuff. I don't want to offend anybody, but episode 119, things to talk about today, things that I wanted to talk about today. There's sort of an unusual, Naked Security, had published an article and actually did a podcast on it too, about how one man silently infiltrated dozens of high-tech networks. And I thought the attack vector was pretty novel because it's, I guess I didn't think about it that way. But it was very effective, right? It didn't require him to crack any passwords. It didn't require him to really, do much, to break in. It's just sort of a backdoor that I think a lot of people don't realize is there.
Yeah.
So a little scary because, the way we develop software today, it's not like everything is developed in-house. We're pulling libraries from all over the damn place. And anyway, that's pretty scary.
There's a lot of implied trust there.
Totally, man. And we're going to have to do something about it because it's another sort of attack vector that's not all that. It's different than what we saw with SolarWinds and that whole debacle, but there's some similarities between the attack vectors. And now it's been published. So if any of the attackers hadn't been thinking this way, well, it's right there in front of you now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about a good friend, Michael Cohen from GPM. He's a lawyer. He just released a new. It's called the Legal Guide to Privacy and Data Security. And the reason why I wanted to announce that is I think it's a great reference. It's completely free. The legal landscape of for information security and privacy in the United States is all over the map, and I think it's a good free reference. Written by a guy who knows what he's talking about. Yeah.
He's I like talking with him.
Yeah, right. He's got that dry sense of humor too. I sort of get it.
I was gonna say that's probably one of the few times I think I've ever said that about a lawyer. Right?
Yeah, we could do all kinds of lawyer jokes. He's probably got some good lawyer jokes too. Maybe we'll have him on as a guest sometime.
Yeah.
So I figured we'd talk about that. And then just before we started the show, we were talking about, it's not old news, but things move really fast around here. But the Oldsmar water attack, we can talk about that again briefly before we roll into some news stuff. So I think that's the agenda. But before we dive in too deep, how you doing? How's things?
Good. Yeah, my oldest turned 15 on Monday and got her learner's permit, so that's terrifying.
I'm looking at your beard right now. I don't see any gray hairs in there, man.
No, they're over on the side.
Okay. If you look at mine, they're like
all over,
right out front.
Now I have a kid driving, so I'm sure it'll turn gray pretty quickly. But yeah, it's fun. She's so excited about it. So kind of something nice and
right,
uplifting and positive, and the crap that has been the last year.
Yeah. I got back. Well, I got back from Puerto Vallarta last week. I came back to this 20 plus damn below zero. Are you kidding me?
I think we went from like Thursday until yesterday where we didn't get above zero. Oh, I don't know if Evan is frozen or if I'm frozen.
Yeah, it's me. It's my VPN, man. I'm always on VPN. So sometimes the VPN kind of gets chunky for me.
Okay. Yeah, it froze up there. I was like, uh-oh.
It was like I turned my VPN off. I am on my own home network, but I'm a security guy.
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, so I missed, so you got home and said it hadn't been above zero since from Thursday till yesterday, and then you froze up, so I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, it's just the whole country is frozen.
Oh, yeah. So I know I've been talking with Oscar, and like they've gotten like half-inch of ice down there, and you see the stories about Texas where those buildings aren't built and insulated for single digits, and the pipes bursting and the electricity being out, and you're seeing pictures and apartments and houses that are like 30 degrees inside, and it's not like up here where you've got snow gear and you're used to these things, but it's crazy.
Well, I've got friends down in Texas and they're all without power.
Yeah, and who knows when it's going to come back.
Right. And that, we take that stuff. I don't know. I sort of take that stuff for granted sometimes. You get up in the morning and you turn on the light, you got a nice warm shower, you got heat in the house, it's just, you take that stuff for granted. I can't imagine going through 20 some odd below here in Minnesota without power.
That would be, I don't know how you could.
Right. Do you have a generator?
I don't. We actually looked very hard at when we had to have our roof replaced due to hail damage at doing a solar roof. But it was just, it was too much at the time.
What do you do with a solar roof in the winter in Minnesota when there's snow and stuff?
It'll melt off.
Will it? Okay.
Yeah, because it'll slide off. It's at an angle.
Okay.
And it's but yeah, our house is, the back of the house is south facing, and based on the Google's solar project, it would cover 99% of our electricity use. So
my mother lives in Ohio, and she's got she bought a farm down there after retirement, and she uses solar power and actually sells a good amount of power back to the power company.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Yeah, so she actually gets negative power, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, just credits.
Yeah. And they we here, I've got a couple of gas generators. My house was built in 1872, so you just never know what's going on around here. The power has been very stable, so I've only had to use them a couple times, but we thought about getting a natural gas generator. Those are really nice. You seen those?
No.
Yeah, basically it's a big generator. It's usually a whole house generator, and it hooks up to your natural gas. And some of them are built with automatic transfer switches. So when power goes out, it will just automatically kick on, and they're pretty quiet, so you don't have to go out there and start it or anything.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think Home Depot has them. Lowe's has them. You can find them online. I've thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got natural gas, so it might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're sort of expensive, but when you need them, you don't really think about the expense, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Luckily, knock on wood, we've had very little power issues up in Minnesota, period. So
Well, it's funny how the power grid sort of works too, because you live what, maybe less than 10 miles from me,
Yeah.
and your power might be really stable because you also live in a newer neighborhood. I live in, a downtown, small town where it's an old neighborhood, older infrastructure. It's not uncommon. I would say once a year, maybe twice a year, we'll lose power here. And I've run my generators before. I actually borrowed or lent one of my generators to a friend. And then the generator I had running in my garage, and there were extension cords going to 3 other houses because they didn't have generators.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I was running, my neighbor to the back, I was running his refrigerator. The neighbor over here, I was running his freezer. He's got one of those chest freezers. He didn't want to lose all his meat and everything. And then I had, my own. It was kind of funny.
That is. Oh, now if the power goes out in the winter and it's gonna be out for an extended period, you just put your stuff out in the garage. Like, I think our garage yesterday was like 15 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's nuts how fast too that cold just sort of sneaks up on you. When you go outside, at first you're like, yeah, it's not so cold. And then next thing you know, your fingers are stinging and your face is falling off.
Oh, just, at the bus stop, we wait in the car till the bus comes around the corner. Then I get out and help the kindergartner get his backpack and stuff because he's got all his snow gear. Walk to the bus, like we're at the intersection, right? So they'll walk to the bus and wait for it to leave because all the parents have to wave because your kids get upset if you don't. And my mustache is like frozen solid. It's got icicles just from breathing. It's so cold.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who's down in Austin, and he was texting me, he showed me the temperature, and he's like, I don't expect any sympathy, but, I'm like, well, actually, I'll give you sympathy, man. I feel bad about cold, just because it gets down to 23, 30 below zero here doesn't mean I don't feel bad for somebody who's cold in other parts of the country, man. It sucks.
I said, they're not typically gonna have the right gear to get through that because it's not normal. Why would you get heavy gear and snow pants and boots and all that stuff if this happens once a decade?
Right.
Even if it's once a year, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. All right, let's go to this article. This, from Naked Security. The guy's name is Burson. I can't remember his last name. Alex Burson. So Alex Burson did a paper, wanted to do a research study, and what he wanted to do was, there are bug bounties everywhere. So he didn't break any laws or anything.
Right.
He followed the rules, and in that he capitalized on the fact that many of our software programs are not all contained, to a single development shop, right? You call libraries and things that other people have written because it makes your code more efficient. Because some of these libraries, I mean, they do functions that it would take you years to develop.
Right. Well, why reinvent the wheel with some of this stuff? Because, like you said, yeah, this things can take a long time. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you take like, in the article, one example is, bcrypt.dll, which is for encryption, obviously. It's simple to call that function, bcrypt gen random and encrypt whatever it is you want to encrypt versus write the entire, library to perform all those functions. So that's the good thing is it makes our code much more efficient. And the bad thing is we're pulling libraries and we're trusting a bunch of different people, some open source, many times outside of our own organization. We're trusting their development, their testing, their security when we're pulling in those things into our own software. And nobody's really immune to this. I mean, Security Studio is a software development shop where they're doing all kinds of things. They didn't write every single line of code, right? I mean, you almost can't nowadays. We've become so dependent upon reusing code, across organizations. Well, so understanding that, he went down the path of trying to figure out because take Microsoft, for instance. Microsoft will have their, they do keep things somewhat containerized. So they may write, a piece of code and then store it internally, and then just call that code internally, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, if you can figure out the name of the library that's being called, you could potentially create a new library outside of that. So,
yeah. Well, even then, like they have a good example there of, FaceNet. Well, right. That you're dependent on, you use it, so you're dependent on that. But then you look, and just at a high level, there's like 15 libraries that FaceNet depends on because it stacks, right? So, FaceNet is dependent on an example, Chinese Whispers. Chinese Whispers needs JS Network X, which needs Babel runtime, which needs Regenerator runtime. So it just stacks, and yeah, it makes your life a lot easier, but it's complex behind the scenes.
Super complex, because that you go down through the layers, right? It's like following the branch of a tree, right? Mm-hmm. It just branches out and branches out and branches out. So yeah, FaceNet calls at types /end array or ND array, ardparse, blessed contrib, brolog, canvas, Chinese Whispers then calls JS networks, knuth shuffle, num.js, JS networks, Babel runtime, Lodash. I mean, on and on and on. And so one little call might actually be, you think it's just one call to one library, but actually it might be a call to 100 different libraries, 1,000 different libraries. I mean, the rabbit hole can go really, really deep.
Well, what do we say about complexity?
Oh my God, right? It gets super complex. And so,
security.
Right. And we call those dependencies, right? I mean, one piece of code is dependent upon another piece of code, which is dependent on another piece of code, and on and on and on. And so we have, understanding that this gets really complex, and we need to automate the updating, because that's another thing, right? You need to patch every line of code beyond, I would say, hello world, mm-hmm. probably has an error in it somewhere, right? Or a vulnerability that maybe the developer didn't realize at the time. Technology has changed. I mean, there's just a ton of different reasons on why you need to keep your code up to date.
Yeah.
So recognizing that that's a big issue, we have things like PyPy, right? For Python, Ruby Gems for Ruby, NPM for Node.js. These are package management tools that, essentially figure out, or try to manage the dependency complexity and go out and get all of these updates automatically. So your code, so you don't have to keep track of, well, I need to update this and update that and update this. All that stuff sort of through the chain ends up kind of getting updated automatically for you. Mm-hmm. It's a huge convenience. Plus, I think it's a good security thing. But what happens, if you can essentially trick one of these package management tools to update code with your code versus the code it was supposed to be updating with.
Right.
And so in that is sort of what Burson took advantage of, or, sort of pointed out that this is an issue. So big vendors, and what's mentioned in the article is Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Uber, Yelp, many, many others, they have their dependencies, but some of those dependencies are also internal.
Right.
Right. So we can have dependencies where we're calling some sort of, shared public sort of library, or some open source thing, We've also got internal dependencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes sense because every organization to be different, has different needs. So yeah, you build your custom code that calls the public library, so you're not rewriting everything.
Yeah, yeah. And some of that code you want to keep proprietary. Some of that code you invested a lot of time in. So maybe some of your libraries are internal.
Mm-hmm.
You want to keep them, internal. So organizations who keep those things internal, what he was curious about is if he could collect a list or find a list of unique package names from these big players and then change or essentially create the same package, not the same package, not the same code, but the same package name, mm-hmm. essentially, would one of these package management tools automatically update with his code versus the internal code?
Right, based on name.
Based on name. Yep. And so, he went about that. Now, finding the unique package names of some of the code, the big players, you can oftentimes find that in the code itself.
Right. Which isn't, it's not necessarily secret, right? If they're publishing it out to make a website work, well then, yeah, it's public.
Right. Right. So then taking those internal names, putting them into, open source package repositories with the same names, and then publishing those, and then basically sitting back and watching and seeing what calls home. Right. He didn't insert any malicious code, malware.
No, it was just that call home functionality of verification.
Right. Right. And, essentially waited, and dozens of them ended up calling home. I think, so probably surprising, maybe. I mean, I can just imagine when he's sitting there like, oh yeah, they're calling home. So that's a big issue, right? If we can essentially trick software, an application to use my library instead of the one that you intended it to use.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, you have full remote code execution at that point.
What's to stop you?
Yeah. Ugh.
So the sort of the scary thing about this is this has been this way for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder how many attacks we're going to learn about now that people are going back and going, that's what happened.
Right. Yeah. So so there's some good, tips on how, if you are a software development shop, on how you can, kind of avoid this attack. I think none of the list of things is going to guarantee it.
And just as a kind of an aside, but on top, along the same lines, the web server that had the malicious activity, it was due to a DLL or basically the library that was like 3 years old, or it had a known execution or remote code execution vulnerability that was patched in 2019, and it was from 2016. So, you got to have, sure, the web server itself, the OS, and the web server software was updated, but those packages that they were using for functionality, they didn't think to update that.
Right.
So basically the same kind of thing.
It is, man. And how many times have we seen, I've seen it, I can remember at least a half dozen times when the maintainer of open source code essentially, wants to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so another maintainer comes in, or somebody else, ends up, sort of maintaining the code. But didn't we have a mage cart, wasn't it? Mage
mm-hmm.
cart.
Yeah.
It was a malicious person who took over maintenance of the code. And mage cart was in, thousands and thousands of installations.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy on this one was it was paid software. Like it was, you know, commercial software that didn't get updated.
Right.
You know, I could see where you're going though. Like, you know, that maintainer stops, maybe nobody takes over, and now it doesn't get updated. But it's so, you know, got so many dependencies, or other libraries have depend on it, that you can't just stop using it.
Right. Right. So from a software development perspective, I mean, you really need to be cognizant of these attack vectors, right? And account for them in your own software development. As a consumer, you're powerless.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is literally one of the few times where there is nothing you can do.
Right. I don't know. Yeah, because you wouldn't know if this is normal behavior,
right,
or abnormal behavior, because you don't know the internal workings of the code. And it's not like you're going to, take it, decompile it, try to figure out all these things, figure out all the dependencies, track that back, and go down the path of who calls what and what, I might forget about it.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a huge mess, man. And I'm thankful that he, went down this path and took this approach, because it opens up a whole Pandora's box of issues that we're going to have to account for or deal with somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he has a good article at the end from Microsoft. I haven't read it yet, but the 3 ways to mitigate risk using private package feeds. So I've downloaded that. I'm going to be reading that later for fun, because that's what we do. But yeah, I thought this was a really well written article, and had some really good recommendations at the end.
Right, for sure. And for people who want to reference it or go read it themselves, the name of the article is How One Man Silently Infiltrated Dozens of High-Tech Networks. It's on the Naked Security blog by Sophos, a really good read. The author does a great job of walking you through how this becomes how this is such a big issue, and it's kind of that Pandora's box. Mm-hmm. I also like how, there were 6 tips on what you can do, from a development perspective. So the first one is separate your developers from live public repositories. Don't allow external package updates into your development network until they've been downloaded and vetted by your security team. So, it's basically creating a container where you're not just going to allow these automatic external package updates. You're going to vet them first, make sure that they're legitimate, and then allow them into your repository.
Yeah. And if you read the actual article that's referenced there's a lot more technical information in it. It's on Medium, but that was really cool. It's crazy how some of these people find these things. And I know our guys have done it too with, can't mention some of the stuff because but it just blows my mind. I saw that and I was like, I probably would have never thought of that.
Well, that's why I did, and that opens up another thought process, no matter how good you think you are, how, technically brilliant you are, mm-hmm. It's so important to have different perspectives. Different people look at problems from a different way. I'm much more of a break down your front door kind of guy. You know what I mean? Occasionally, if it's too hard to break through your door, I'll maybe look for something around the other side. Whereas other people think, I'm already looking around the other side. Mm-hmm. I don't give a crap about the front door. And it's just a different way of thinking. It's a different perspective. And people like Bersan, people like you, people like, Oscar and his team. That's why it fascinates me, because it's like you looked at this problem from a totally different angle, mm-hmm. and exposed something, made it, made our solution a lot more valuable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The more diversity and experience, we've said it many times. It's going to make the team and make you better.
Yeah. And I look at it from I'm much more of a logic person too, logic kind of reason kind of person. Thinking critically, take race out of it, take everything else out of it, take gender out of it. What's important just functionally is the diversity of thought. Now, somebody who grows up as in a different race than me has a different perspective on things. That's why they're so valuable. I mean, all these different perspectives, right? Race, gender, sexual preference, whatever. You're thinking different than I am. And rather than like, that's bad, it's like, no, bring that stuff. We want that.
Yeah. And, I just don't get people that, and we see it all the time. And that's probably part of the problem with our industry is that they know everything and aren't willing to listen to others.
Well, I think those are the people that are the easiest to attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you're so myopic and closed-minded and focused on this one thing while, everybody's taking stuff out the back door.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You're so focused on making sure the front door is locked and secure that you forgot the garage is wide open.
Yeah. All right. So other things, just real quick, I'll go through the list just in the article. Be prepared to rewrite your modules and keep dependencies under control. Really vet every single dependency that you use in your code and follow the rabbit hole, right? It's your responsibility to do that, not your consumer's responsibility to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So vet it all the way through. And if you can't, or you're too lazy or don't want to, well, then don't use it.
Yeah.
You got to know how your code works, man. And the code that you're borrowing from other people, you got to know how that works.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah. Can't just assume.
No. Another tip, review all package update tools and stop them accessing public repositories unless they are supposed to. Specify and verify dependencies that are and their allowed versions as strictly as you can. Don't let code review become a simple checkbox. Oh my God, checkbox security ticks me off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never works. The checkboxes are meant to be used at a higher level, right? Did you complete this task? And this task might be, a static code review, given all these requirements. So it's not like the minimum I do is, it's just the checkbox. It's like, no, it's a reminder sort of thing, not a
right.
Yeah,
agreed.
The last one is verify external package updates by watching for unexpected file system changes on a test system first before releasing into production. That just seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And really the onus is on development, man. This is not something consumers can or should do.
And I can tell you, we've had multiple engagements with companies that do, either software development companies or internal dev teams with our pen testers about SDLC. And you talk to them and it's like, ooh, okay.
Well, if you can't develop software responsibly, don't develop software.
Right. And I will give credit to those companies. They realized and identified a vulnerability or weakness and took steps to correct it, which, that's really all you can ask for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and one of the things we're working on, and I haven't really mentioned it too much because it's not exactly ready, is me and some friends are putting together a think tank sort of thing. And in that is, and it's not like, you'll have to see eventually we'll put it on the show, and you and I will talk about it, but it's very much focused on fixing real issues in our industry as a collective, as a collaboration, mm-hmm. keeping money out of it, keeping ego out of it, keeping all this crap out of it, And so the core values of this are very strict, right? It's not there for you to make more money. We're not going to accept sponsorships. It's very clear. But one of those problems, as a seed problem that I'm suggesting that the group work on, because you'll become a member too, I'm guessing, you'll certainly be invited to become a member. It's up to you on whether you want to. But one of those issues is, how do we hold ourselves accountable? So how do we hold a software development organization accountable for crappy code that leads to significant losses for their consumers or death?
Mm-hmm.
Because until you start holding software development shops and start holding, Microsoft, Adobe, whoever accountable for their code, you're going to keep having this problem. It's going to get worse.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just a simple problem either, because how much of this is open source, and how do you hold a volunteer that's not making any money, that's just doing it, do you hold them accountable because they made a mistake, versus that company that's counting on it and didn't do their proper, vetting? It's like, that's complex.
Well, and these tech companies are making billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
You can't tell me that you can't slow down a little bit, invest a little more time and effort in ensuring your code is top-notch quality, right? Including following all these dependencies. To put it on the consumer who can't afford that and couldn't do it anyway.
Yeah. My dog is an idiot. He's out on the deck rolling around in the snow. It's like, what, -2 out?
My dog's an idiot too.
Sorry.
I love my dog so much, but yeah.
Sorry, it totally distracted me. The deck's right outside the office. Yeah. But I agree.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that, man. I'm excited to put that together and excited to be a part of that. The other thing that I wanted to mention was, so Michael Cohen, who's an attorney at Lathrop GPM, really good guy. I enjoy every time I get to, visit with him. They just published a free guide. It's called A Legal Guide to Privacy and Data Security. It's current. It's dated 2021. It's a long read, but it's a reference guide. It's 220 pages long. I doubt most people would read it cover to cover, but he does a fantastic job of breaking down all the confusion.
Well, and I don't think I would guess he didn't intend it to be read cover to cover. It is really a reference. Hey, I have a question about this. I'm going to go look at that.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's really, really comprehensive.
Yeah, I did read, some of it. Well, and one of the questions that, I debated with some friends, and I think maybe even you, was, the right to privacy.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, so on page 1, essentially, actually the 15th page in the guide, he's got, the legal basis for a right to privacy. And I thought, wow, that's a good read. And so he highlights, constitutionally, there is no explicit reference to privacy as a right in the United States Constitution. But the Supreme Court of the United States has, however, held in several cases that there exists a right to privacy, or at least a reasonable expectation of privacy, as implied in the First, Third, Fourth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments. And so I start reading that, and I'm like, okay, that's great that we're not doing any of that crap.
Mm-hmm.
As a country, as an industry, the Supreme Court of the United States has held that these things are true, but that's not how we're operating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's it is a really interesting, discussion. And, the fact that, he lists in there that there's 10 states that have right to privacy explicit in their state constitutions.
Mm-hmm.
10. That's not good.
Well, and they're all and their language is all different too, right?
Right. Yep.
And then what about the other 40 states? And it's not like you containerize all of your information in one state, right?
Well, I think that's why you're, looking at some of these big companies saying, hey, let's get a federal privacy law. It's not because they're doing it out of goodwill. It's complying with 50 individual states is a nightmare.
Yes. So if you're in security and you're not a lawyer, or even if you are a lawyer, it's just a great reference guide. I've got it downloaded to my computer already and started reviewing it, and it's going to be handy in a lot of different.
Oh yeah.
respects.
Yeah, we get asked these privacy questions all the time, and it's always, I'm not a lawyer. This does not constitute legal advice. If you want here, go talk to a lawyer, but you can look it up and give an opinion. It's like, hey, this is how I read it, but that doesn't protect you. You need to talk to a lawyer.
Well, and I don't mind at all quoting lawyers. I mean, this is, if I quote right out of this guide, makes me sound smart. That's for sure.
Right. And he does a good job of putting it in a way that you can use too. It's not just quoting, the law.
It's a very good reference guide.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best reference guides that I've seen. And it's free. Yeah. He's got it broken down, legal basis for the right to privacy is kind of the opening, and then talks about federal laws governing data privacy and security. He's got HIPAA, COPA, CAN-SPAM, ECPA, GLBA, TCPA, FCRA, FACTA, CFAA. Some I've even heard of before.
Yeah. The Junk Facts Prevention Act. I've never heard of that.
I never either. Yeah, Junk Facts Prevention Act, JFPA. Yep, I never heard of it either. And then he talks about, then he's got a section, dedicated to privacy and the employment relationship, which is, pretty dang cool. And then he breaks down all the state data privacy and security laws, starting with Minnesota, because that's his home state. And it was actually, this was a collaboration effort between the state of Minnesota and him to make this guide free. And then breaks down all the other states.
Yes.
It's pretty cool stuff. Oh, and then he does talk a little bit about Canada and, other countries, but this is really focused on domestic. Yeah,
I'll definitely read through the Minnesota one just because it's where we live. So it's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. He emailed this to me yesterday, and I was like, oh, dang. Because the last one I liked too, but this is really, really, this is a lot better even than this last one.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah. And the guy's name again, Michael Cohen. If you need I don't know if he needs business. I doubt it because he's probably swamped, but he works at Lathrop GPM, which is also a really good law firm. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right. That stuff that's not a cluster enough for you on a Wednesday morning. How about some news?
Yeah. Oh boy. So here's one. The first one I've got. It's hot for security from Bitdefender, their blog, and Graham Cluey is I think the author of this article. The title is "After Hackers Blackmailed Their Clients, Finnish Therapy Firm Declares Bankruptcy." Do you remember this attack? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, they're bankrupt now.
Yeah.
No surprise.
And did you see how they got in? The login was root.
It's insane, man. The basics, isn't it always the basics?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard to excuse yourself for that. And also the fact that, the CEO, Ville Tapio, I believe it's Ville, it's Ville. They knew about it for a while, tried to kind of cover it up. And it wasn't until the attackers started going after the clients that it's like, okay, we have to sort of spill the beans here. And so I wonder if, I don't know, it'd be nice on things like this to hold an executive criminally responsible because it's criminal behavior.
Yeah, I didn't see anything specific to him other than that he was fired.
Yeah. I mean,
he was responsible for setting up the database, apparently. So
you say, so the CEO sets up the database gets hacked, and then he tries to hide it. Yeah, don't have your CEO set up databases in most cases.
No, not that. No offense to CEOs looking at you.
Yeah, no, I'm not setting up no database.
But even if you had done that in the past, that's not what you've done in a really long time.
No. Well, and even if I was super skilled in setting up databases as a CEO, I've got 1,000 different things to do.
Right. That's not your job.
How much attention can I actually give to it? How much attention to detail? You know, I'm going to get that thing set up. Does it work? Does it work? Okay, go through and try to secure it, harden it. Okay, and I got something else to do. And then you forget where you left off. Yeah, no. Let the specialists do that stuff. The only databases I set up is maybe in test. You know, I'll monkey around with something, but
more for like, yeah. Yep.
So 40,000 patients were affected by the breach. At the end of the day, the name of the organization was Vastamo, a psychotherapy practice, right? So really significant data to go and blackmail the clients with. So sorry, not sorry that you're declaring bankruptcy, because you probably shouldn't have been in business to begin with.
Yeah, the downside is the people aspect. There were 400 employees.
Yeah.
How many of those were completely unaware or had no input into any of this, and now they're out of a job?
Exactly. Yeah, hopefully they'll land on their feet, and hopefully, the CEO maybe lands in jail. Because you're right. Look at that. You do that crappy behavior. You put 40,000 people at risk, and the 400 employees that you lead that depend on you to make good decisions. And you got to pay a price for that, man.
Yeah, agreed.
Those are real lives. Those are real people that suffer. All right. The next one we can keep sort of short. It's from SiliconANGLE. And I just thought it was interesting because I haven't heard much, publicly from Microsoft CEO President Brad Smith. He labels the SolarWinds hack as the largest, most sophisticated attack ever.
I mean, he said that they figure it's well over 1,000 engineers that worked on the attack. That's a significant amount of manpower.
I'm telling you, brother, this is, and people don't, at what point do you just come out and just state that this is an act of war?
Yeah. Well, it's been attributed to Russians, but that's as far as it's gone.
Well, we talked about last week how the Chinese, although they didn't come through this same door, they were there too.
Yep.
And when will people really realize that the Chinese are not, and the Russians are not our friends?
Right.
And I'm not saying a Chinese person, right, who immigrates to the United States, that's different. Yes, they're Chinese. I'm talking about the Chinese government. I'm talking about the Russian government.
Right. The leadership.
Not our friends.
No. And I think that's a good distinction too, because I think a lot of times people do say, they're Chinese, they're good. No. You've got good and bad people everywhere. So look at the government, the leadership. That's where the issue is.
Exactly. So most significant attack ever. That doesn't come as any surprise to you and me and many of the people in information security. But the thing I liked about it is that this came from an interview on 60 Minutes that ran, I think it was last Sunday night or last Sunday night.
It ran on Valentine's Day.
Yeah. So hopefully the public wakes up, because the only way you're going to get real change at this level is a governmental change. And the only way that that's going to happen is if you get the legislators to start taking this more seriously, crafting real bills and laws that actually work. And the only way that's ever going to happen is if the citizens actually become educated and demand a change.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm grateful that this was a CBS News thing. It wasn't some, security blog somewhere that none of the normal people read.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that and see.
Yeah. The last one I've got is, from the Hacker News. And yeah, I'm tired of Microsoft patches, but, you got to do them. We issued patches, Microsoft issued patches for in the wild 0-day attacks or vulnerabilities, attacks, exploits, vulnerabilities, and 55 other Windows bugs. I don't know if you've noticed, but certainly on my own systems, I've noticed I've had to patch a lot more and I've had to reboot a lot more in the last month. Now, the fact that the other things, going on in the world, including SolarWinds, and an increase in patching of not just Microsoft, but other things, Apple, there's a relation. You'll never know the exact correlation, but it's not coincidence.
Right.
So patch your Windows systems, and it's a pain in the butt for everybody when you have to reboot and you got 500 windows open. It's like, son of a gun. I can't remember what I had open where. Do you remember when Microsoft promised us that we weren't ever going to have to reboot again on a patch?
No. I probably just ignored it as like, yeah, right.
Yeah, they promised it. It was sometime around Windows 2000, I think.
Mm.
People were migrating off of NT and 95 and whatever. It was a while ago. But I remember because we were complaining about when we were more sysadmin-y was, I'm tired of rebooting all the damn time. It's so disruptive to the business.
Yeah. I'm tired of having to work on the weekends or overnight to patch.
Right. And I think a lot of times we were using like HFNetCheck for patching. Do you remember HFNetCheck?
No, I never used that. Okay,
that was a command line tool that HFNetCheck, and I think it was Shavlik. That did that. Yeah. But, so Microsoft's, came out in public, and I got to find a reference to where they said it, but publicly, I think they said, we're going to build new versions of Windows that will not require you to reboot when you patch.
That's funny. I don't remember that at all.
I have to find that. So here we are in 2021. I'm still having to reboot all the time, which is so disruptive because I do have a bunch of stuff open. I might have 4 or 5, spreadsheets open. 5, 6 different Word. And then the fact that you've got all this authentication with cloud services, right? That's so tightly interweaved with all of this that it's not uncommon for me to use Word, and then I get the stupid error message saying you can't update or can't save to my OneDrive because of authentication. It's just like, give me a break.
I've used the WSS offline.
Yeah.
I use that for years. Anytime there was a new server, before it got on the network, you have that USB you plug in and run all the updates because it's immediately vulnerable and you don't want it touching the internet.
Right. But I would suggest, for people that are responsible for, technical aspects of security in organizations to go read what the actual patches are. So we do, obviously patch, keep software updated. We've been beating that drum for a long time, but I wonder how many security folks actually take the time to go and read what the vulnerabilities were that we're patching against. But it's always a good, interesting read.
Yeah.
All right. That's that. I think that's our news. Brad, that this is it for episode 119. Is that what I said when I started this thing?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, and we are going to get back to writing show notes. You and I were talking about before. We will start posting show notes again. We're not going to post the kind of the verbatim sort of dialogue-y show notes. We're just going to post the things that we're going to talk about on the podcast. So Brad, thank you to our listeners. Do you have any shout outs?
Yeah, I'll give Matt Dowd and Tom Freudel shout out for their hack.edu. It's our internal kind of training they did a thing on juicy potato, so token manipulation last week.
Nice.
Apparently went really, really well.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll stick with the technical services team too. I'll give a shout out to Mike Thompson, Pinky, and I'll give a shout out to Eric. I always give shout outs to Oscar, so I'm not giving him one anymore. I mean, not today. He always gets shout outs. But those guys did a great job, I thought, on Hackabox on Friday.
I wasn't able to listen. I missed it because I had a meeting. I'm so bummed.
Well, I think it's recorded too.
So. Yeah, I just haven't had a chance.
But I love the way those guys relate. And when I watch them, not only are they like super, super skilled, they're just normal guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
They're so much fun to work with.
I love it.
Yeah,
that was fun. So shout out to those guys. All right. Thank you to our listeners. Send us things by email at unsecurity@protonmail.com. I am actually going to go check that email today. So it's been a while. My apologies. It's on my list. If you're the social type, you can certainly socialize with us on Twitter. I'm Evan, at Evan Francine. So my name. And Brad's at Brad Nye, his name. And if you want to follow things going on with our companies, FRSecure is always putting out some good content, like things like Hacklebox, things like webinars and things that they're doing. They're usually, or they're always very educational. And I think, did they do the one with what was the one they were going to do with Huntress? Did they?
Yeah, Huntress coming up, and then we've got one. I don't know when that one is, but then we've got one. I've got one with Arctic Wolf here in a couple of weeks.
Okay, cool, very cool. So tune into follow FRSecure on Twitter to check up on that stuff, and then Security Studio, we're at Studio Security. That's it. So good. Have a good day. We'll talk to you next week.